All right, nation. This topic has been getting under my skin for a while now. Misinformation and clickbait titles are the keys to your downfall. And I don't want to see that happen to my subscribers. But it seems like all that's required to trick most people is a muscled up picture and a cute title. And because people want to believe things so badly, common sense just goes out the window. Especially when it comes to the topic of building muscle and losing fat at the same time. And I can understand why, guys. It's a loaded question that highly depends on many factors, such as how much body fat you have, how long you've been training, are you manipulating your calories daily with things like carb cycling or added cardio, and my favorite, are you cycling low dosages of steroids but claiming natty while making unnatural gains? And I know that that's going to rub a lot of you guys the wrong way, but I'm not here to lie to you guys, all right? And I'm not here to give you false expectation and false information as to what's achievable. And you know, it's funny. I finally had a chance to meet a fellow OG YouTuber. You guys might know him. His name is Omar. Funny story. We randomly met in a Chipotle at the Arnold Classic. Like, we just both happened to be there because Chipotle obviously is the place to be. But, you know, we talked to each other for quite a while about all the BS that's been going around on YouTube lately, and we saw eye to eye on a lot of things, this being one of them. But for today, we're just going to stick to the topic of how a positive nitrogen balance can impact your muscle gaining potential. Now, a lot of you are convinced that as long as you remain in a positive nitrogen balance, you can build muscle and lose fat at the same time, regardless of where you are in your fitness journey. But guys, how can you forget the fundamentals of fitness? To lose weight, you need to be in a caloric deficit. To gain muscle, you need to be in a caloric surplus. They are literally opposing actions. So to clear things up, let's first talk about what a positive nitrogen balance actually is. Well, I'm not going to go all scientific on you guys, but here are the basics you need to know. There are two processes that are going on in your body 24/7, 365 days a year, and they are protein synthesis and protein breakdown. Now, in general, when protein is synthesized, more nitrogen is accumulated because protein is comprised of amino acids, which are rich in nitrogen. On the other hand, when protein is broken down, you end up with nitrogen loss because nitrogen escapes from the muscles. Here's the kicker, though. Your muscle building potential is the result of the following equation. Muscle growth equals protein synthesis minus protein breakdown. So what that means is that when this number is positive, you have what is called a positive nitrogen balance. And when it's negative, you have what is called a negative nitrogen balance. So it should go without saying that you can't build muscle without being in a positive nitrogen balance, and this is where people get their logic screwed up. Therefore, they think that this is the only requirement for building muscle, and they will try to convince you that even if you're in a caloric deficit, as long as you are still able to have a positive nitrogen balance, you can keep on building muscle while losing fat. Now, wouldn't that just be great, right? Well, if we dive deeper into this logic, guys, these people support the premise that you can positively affect your nitrogen balance by doing specific things like this: having more dietary protein, such as whole foods and supplements, sleeping more to help maximize recovery, avoiding overtraining, avoiding stress and anxiety, hydrating properly, and supplementing with recovery-aiding supplements like creatine, beta-alanine, BCAAs, etc. And of course, by not doing all of these things properly, you will be negatively affecting your nitrogen balance, favoring protein breakdown instead of synthesis, and end up not building muscle mass or even losing muscle mass. Now, all these points are actually true, guys, okay? Let me just make that clear. But with all these things in mind, can you build muscle and lose fat at the same time? And that's what the question is. Can you build muscle and lose fat at the same time while in a positive nitrogen balance? Or do you have to go on a bulking phase to see muscle growth, then cut for muscle definition? Well, the answer will surprise you, and it's actually no to both. The problem with the theory of positive nitrogen balance is that it's simply not realistic nor factual, guys. The truth is that you cannot, and I will repeat, You cannot build muscle if you are not in a calorie surplus as a natural lifter. Your body just cannot synthesize new tissue if it's busy trying to retain what it already has or is in the process of burning it. Now, it doesn't have to be an extreme surplus where you end up gaining or storing more fat than muscle. As you guys know, I'm an advocate for lean gains, and all you really need is a slight 250 to 500 calorie surplus to build muscle and keep the fat gain minimal. Never assume gaining more fat equals more muscle. We've talked about this. But what if you're relatively slim but still retain a lot of body fat, or are skinny fat, as I like to say? Do you need to go on a cutting phase first, lose all that fat, and then begin your muscle building phase? Guys, absolutely not. We talked about this in my skinny fat video. What nobody will tell you is that you cannot build muscle and lose fat at the same time. But you don't have to do that anyways, and here's why. Let's say you're 150 pounds now, standing at about 20% body fat. That's pretty skinny if you ask me, but at the same time, you do have a lot of body fat on your body. How much fat? Well, 20% of 150 pounds is exactly 30 pounds of fat. So here's what you want to do. You go on a strict lean bulk phase indefinitely, so that 250 to 500 calories surplus over what your TDEE is. Now, you won't ever need to cut if you do this. But why? Well, after a year or so, you'll probably have put on 20 to 25 pounds of muscle, which is to be expected for a natural lifter in their first year of training. Obviously, as long as you're eating correctly, hydrating, getting enough sleep, and training hard enough. Those obviously have to come into play here. Therefore, after a year, you could be 170 pounds, and if you stuck to your meal plan, you wouldn't have put on any additional fat. If anything, it would be very minimal, guys. So you'll still have 30 pounds of fat on you, but if you crunch those numbers, you'll discover you're now automatically at 17.5% body fat. And it's not magic, guys. It's just math. You don't actually lose fat, but you appear as if you have lost fat because you have gained more muscle. And with all this new muscle on your frame, the fat you had seems less, and you look more proportionate and aesthetic. And that's just your first year of training, guys. Now, if you keep doing that for 3 or 4 years, you'll eventually probably be at 190 pounds and 10% body fat without ever having to go on a cut. There is, however, an exception to this rule. If you're a complete beginner, you can theoretically build muscle and lose fat at the same time because your body has never been trained before. These are called newbie gains, and it's a term tossed around quite often in the fitness industry. In fact, this is why a lot of you guys who hit a plateau in your training can't seem to figure out what the problem is. And what I mean by that is, no matter what training program you use, good or bad, you will see those newbie gains. But if the program is complete trash, you will gain 10, 20 pounds of newbie muscle, but then plateau super quickly. But the reason why you gained that muscle and lost some fat was because all that happened is a new stimulus was introduced to your body, and that stimulus was a powerful one. Your body had no choice but to lose some fat and build some muscle at the same time to adapt to the new stimulus, which was your training. But after a few months, this effect will eventually start to fade simply because the stimulus isn't intense enough anymore and your body's sensitivity to it has gradually decreased. That's when you'll have to switch things into high gear and start eating more protein and calories in general in order to facilitate new growth. But I do want to say one more thing before we end the video. I know you guys are going to ask about some of the major transformations you might see on Facebook or Instagram where someone loses a lot of weight and looks ripped and huge. But did they lose fat and build muscle at the same time? Well, again, guys, it's kind of like a mirage. If someone is very big, let's say they're 35% body fat, and they end up losing 15% of that fat without building really any more muscle. Maybe they just improve what they already had. They will appear as though they have built muscle because their frame will be much tighter and proportionate with all that lost fat. Or they jumped on a cycle of steroids, which unfortunately happens a lot in these transformation photos and builds false expectations, which is the reason why this video was made to begin with. Just use your head, guys. The information is clear, and my team and I will be more than happy to help you on my website, muscularstrength.com. You can use my custom meal plan app to create the perfect meal plan for your goals, and choose from my variety of programs designed for muscle gain or fat loss. Be sure to smash that like button if you haven't already. And as always, guys, more good stuff coming soon. See ya.